We have a lot of bearding today. Part of this is because I've been weed whacking around the hive, and most of it is because of the high heat and humidity we're having right now. But also, I haven't taken mouse entrance reducers off a lot of these hives. But having said that, even hives which have the full entrance reducer off all the way across are bearding right up to the third box here. So we'll make sure those entrance reducers are off for now. Bearding during the daytime on a hive during a honeyflow shouldn't be very significant. The bees should be out in the field. So if we have a lot of bearding, that for me, that's telling me the honeyflow might be over in this area. But we'll see. We'll put supers on if necessary, and if we're lucky, they'll continue to fill them. These are hives from our Towers of Queens here, so they were just small units going into a honey super. And they have been busy. See all the white comb here? And for this brand new comb that's just been built, they're putting a lot of honey on this hive. So we're going to get a super on this right away. But we'll have a look at the other ones first before Jordan goes. I'll give it back to you, Jordan. We'll open up a couple. And then you can follow up by putting the honey supers on. Judging by the bees here and everything, there's a lot of bees in here. Now, a lot of the bees are out in the front of the hive here, and they're not quite as busy here, but they clearly have been busy. Let's see what's in some of these frames. This doesn't look or feel particularly full of honey. Oh, and having said that, that comb is 2/3 full of honey, and most of this, so they've been busy on it. That looks 3/4 full of honey, so we'll get a super on both of these, even though this is not full of bees. We'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I'll open up this one and we'll get a super. We'll put one of the mediums on there and a shallow on there. This is a deep on top. Deep, which is partially full of honey, 3 drawn combs, so I'm going to spread out these foundation a bit further. Remember, these hives are being recovering from both a lack of care early in the spring and resulted in swarming, but got full of brood. They are going to be substantial colonies not long from now. Full of capped brood upstairs here. This is missing a frame. If we've got a frame, I think we've got a frame of foundation in that deep box we have there. Mm-hmm. We'll stick it in here. Certainly warm enough for it to take the spreading out. So if you take care of that, please, Jordan. Thank you. Substantial amount of bees outside the hive, bearding. Put a deep super on there to give it room. Let's see what's in the deep super now, if anything. The bees. Very nice. Very nice indeed. This deep super is full to the gills. We'll put another medium on here, please, Jordan. That is nice. They're wanting some room and some reward for all their hard work. We've had a nice honeyflow here. Well, it's a beautiful day. After several days of poor wet weather, we've got the sun back, getting into the 70s. We're going to have days into the 70s, nudging 80s this week, and so hopefully we will still have something of a honeyflow. The last 3 days have been down in the low 60s to high 50s and a lot of rain. The rain is a real help, but that cold temperature is something that can kill a honeyflow stone dead. So the encouraging thing to see at the moment is that the bees are still reasonably busy. They're not terrifically busy. If there is a honeyflow, it's not a huge one. But we have some activity. None of the hives have clusters of bees in front of them, which is very good. Once we start getting clusters of bees at the entrances, these are bees that are hanging around waiting for instructions as to where the honeyflow might be. Now, all of my hives were supered up before I left for the 4th of July weekend. So, let's have a quick look here. I'm not expecting much in the certainly have bees in these supers, but there's not much here. These are for comb honey production. There's absolutely nothing going on in this to speak of. This one here. Some combs that got built last year but never got actually filled. So not a great deal happening there. But the supers below, maybe they're getting those filled up. They were filling these up nicely. See some nice white cappings there. These are looking good. Very nice, medium frame, pretty full of honey. Nice white cappings there, absolutely beautiful. And hopefully we'll see more of the same in the super below. Let's have a look there. And the super below, filling up with honey really well. So this is one of the ones that was really filling up early. This one I put on subsequent, and that one was later. So we'll get this super off pretty soon, and this super off the honey pretty soon. Yeah, so I'll be going around the hives this week and rearranging some of these hives so that we can take some of the honey off. Some don't have queen excluders on, and they need queen excluders moving further down. Say for example, like this hive here, there's a queen excluder up here, and I'll be able to take a super or two of honey off it if I take the queen excluder off. This huge hive here, I've got a lot of honey on. I know that this super is full of honey, this super is full of honey, these are filling with honey, and this one's just about empty up here. So I've got a way to go, but what I'm going to actually end up doing is I'll take these off because they still need filling up some more, and I'm going to put my fume board here, drive these bees down, take these two boxes off, and put these supers back on. How about that? I've got a new wagon, but the wheel's not going to fall off. So we're in the hives today and we are going to just do a bit of consolidating, reduce the size of the brood chambers in some of these hives, which should have been done weeks ago. And judging by the activity and the humidity we have, if we, with this humidity, if bees were not finding nectar out there, they would be clustered all up the front of the hive. But they're still busy, so they're bringing in something. It may not be an enormous honey flow right now. Judging by the activity, it's okay. There's some honey flow going on, not a big one. But what we're going to do is consolidate these brood chambers and start the process of removing some of the honey, or at least setting it up to remove the honey later in the week. So let's see what we get. Okay, so our plan here is to, if there is something of significance here, to move the bees, make sure the queen is down below. We'll run this hive as a double brood chamber probably. So we're in a position to get this queen excluded down here. So let's see how things look. Now, because this is above a queen excluder, we don't have to do anything, but I'll take this off. If you lift that off, go to the inside. Now we can see this box has plenty of honey. Hopefully there's no brood up here, but there might be. If there is, we'll deal with that issue separately. But you see plenty of capped honey there. This will be a prime super to take off shortly. So what we will do is put the funnel on here, on top. And we are going to shake these down into this chamber. And we'll flip up this frame right here, which will end up as our upper brood chamber. So you can get the frames out here, Jordan, if you like. I'll get the first one out and then you can start getting out the second to pass to me. Should be pretty much full of honey. Yeah. Or you can use your hive tool, probably be better than mine. Okay, so we don't know, the queen could possibly be up here. So to make sure she's not, they get shaken down there. Just to show, 1 second to one side, lots of frames like this, full of honey. I'll move the camera so we can get a better view. May not be able to hear me from here, but have a better view of what we're doing. On, and now we know the queen is confined to these two bottom chambers as the brood chamber. We'll give them some room. We'll put the only partly filled super here, and just to make sure that we have a bit more room. So we want to make sure that this hive has plenty of room, because we've shaken the extra bees from a deep super down into here, which are plenty of bees. This super is about half occupied, so there's still plenty of room for them to occupy them more, to keep them busy. But we'll put another super of space in there just to make sure that we don't overcrowd them. And a skateboard on. Now the skateboard, of course it's going to be a high lift. The skateboard is a one-way door. So basically the bees can go through this hole and they can come out these 3 points, but they cannot figure out how to get back up. So it's a one-way door, so bees can go down, but they can't come back up. So I'll put the skateboard on. Jordan, perhaps you can give me a hand lifting this up. If you take those two sides, I'll take these two sides. Lift. It won't work too hard. So now the bees are going to come out of this honey super and into the space below. And we'll put our escape board on there. I'm sorry, our inner cover. Try and make it defeat. The thing about a bee escape is we're now leaving this box totally undefended. So we have to make sure that it doesn't have leaks in it, that robber bees can come in. This should be pretty bee proof. Put a good heavy weight on there, a couple of heavy rocks. And we'll make back 24 hours from now, there'll be no bees in here. Even if it had been full of 20,000 bees, there'd be next to no bees in here at all. So let's move on to the next hive. If it doesn't rain on us. This is one I really wanted to work on. So we've got a lot of work to do on this hive. With this hive, we've got no queen excluder on here at all. So we want to make sure, again, we're just going to convert it so that we've got brood down here, and we're going to take this honey off. But we're going to put these further down. So first of all, we've got to make sure the queen is further down, right down. Couple things. We've got brood in these two brood chambers here. We're going to make sure we get the queen down there too, just in case she's up in one of these 5 supers. This can come back off now. 1 second. Move this back to here. This is, we now know that the queen is down in here. This bottom 2 boxes are pretty overfilled. So if we just give this a shake, if we take one side of it through, I'm just going to tap it to the bottom. Okay, take that off. So we know the queen is down in here. We're going to put a queen excluder on in a minute when I put a little bit of smoke on. Let the bees settle down a bit. queen excluder can go on. And as well as these 3 honey supers on here, that's probably more than enough room. A lot of bees pouring out here at the moment. We're getting a bit of bearding on the front of this hive pretty soon. It's just because of the smoke. Let's put that spare honey super on, just to give them some more room. I want to get it on before we have bees crawling up the outside. Okay, and then these 3 are going on in the place of those other 2. So let's get these 3 on. In the order, should go off in reverse order. Put that one on. Way to go before these are filled with honey. But now what we can do is we'll just close this hive up. So we're going to put the inner, is there an inner cover on? Oh yes, it's the So now what we have to do, we still want, this hive has now got all the room it needs, and the brood chamber is down to a double brood chamber. Continuing to grow nicely. Those 2 supers full of honey, they want to be put on another hive to get the rest of the bees off, because you don't want to be taking a box. Even though we've taken 90% of the bees out, we still don't want those in the garage. So we're going to put them elsewhere. And what we'll do, given that there's so few of them, what we can easily do is we'll take a hive like this one. Relatively low down. Mind you, I'd rather do one that wasn't foam. It may not be strong enough. So let's take this hive for example. You want to hold the camera here, Jordan? With this hive, we've got queen excluder, honey super here. It's not affectable, it's not being occupied very strongly. So there's next to no bees in here. It's a small brood chamber, so if anything, this hive could do with a few extra bees. So we're going to give it a few extra bees by putting those honey supers on top of here with one of those one-way doors. So the bee escape goes on, trap side down, and the honey supers will go on top of here. It doesn't matter that you're mixing a few bees from different hives together. That doesn't really matter. So we have to carry them over. The holes, we'll move the other super. Check, no cracks. So we're going to take off because we don't want bees coming through the hole of the inner cover. Checking if it's good and flat. on the top. So now what will happen is that any bees that are remaining in these boxes, which are relatively few because we shook them out, are going to go through the bee escape and into the hive below. I will just be able to come back in, let's say, a couple of days, because there's 2 supers here, to get those supers off. Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. Today we're going to remove the first honey for harvest this year. Not very much, a few deep supers and a couple of shallow ones that we prepared the other day, and they should be ready to go. So what we're going to do, we brought our wagon. What we have set up at the moment is the bees are, the super of honey is above a bee escape, so the bees can go down into the rest of the hive and not come back up. This was set up yesterday, should be long enough for these bees to have vacated that super. So we've got 1 deep there, we've got 1 medium super here above the bee escape, we've got 2 deep supers here above the bee escape, and we've got 1 deep super here above the bee escape. So these are all the ones that we're going to harvest. See how well they've come out of this super. Still a few bees. Not bad.
Still a few, but you want to take it?
Yep. Now, typically 24 to 48 hours is what the bees need to vacate. Also, it works much better when there is a honey flow on than when there isn't a honey flow on, because what that does is it causes the bees to be cycling through the hive. So a couple of days ago, we were out here removing some honey and the camera stopped working, memory was full. So I'm starting again to some extent. We'd set up some of the supers with bee escapes on them, and we took a couple of them off. But right now we've still got a few left on here. And just to remind you how a bee escape works, a bee escape is like a one-way door on the hive, where the bees can go through the board this way, but they can't figure out how to go back that way. So in theory, this having been on here for 3 days now, the bees should be out of these boxes and just in here. So let's see what I can find. Of course, now that I don't have help, I've got to deal with these heavy boxes on my own. This is the way they should work, with no bees up here at all, just the odd one starting to fly in here right now. So I will take them off, try and get them over to the wagon. Okay, and we have one more here that has the bee escape on. Works like a charm. You leave it long enough. There's maybe half a dozen bees in here. That's no big issue. Oh, they're heavy. So a bee escape can work. Really, really well. It's a great labor-saving device as long as you've got the time and you're not in a hurry to get the honey off, because it takes 1, 2, 3 days to get the bees out of the super. But sometimes you are in a hurry and you have to travel to a yard and you want to arrive there, decide to take the super off and take it off there and then. So you can just take the frames out and brush them with the bee brush. Of course, that's going to end up with a lot of ticked off bees, and you end up having the bees jumping back on those frames as soon as you brush the bees off. So there's another thing that you can do. It's called using a fume board. And a fume board is using a bee repellent to drive the bees down the hive. And that can work extremely well. So I'm going to look around to see if there's any hives here right now that are ready to have some honey taken off, and I'll show you how the fume board works. So here's an example of a deep super full of, mostly full of honey, but it's also full of bees. So I'm going to demonstrate how we get the bees out of this hive using a fume board. Fume board is basically a box which has usually plastic on the top, but you can make these yourself. But basically what it does is it uses a repellent which the bees find bad smelling, and it doesn't require much. It takes a few drops around it, scattered around, and depending on the repellent you use, some of them smell really bad to us as well, and some smell just very bad to the bees. Some of them require warm temperatures for it to work very well. So these bee repellents do tend to work really well when the temperature is about 80 degrees, 90 degrees, so because it makes the volatile substances in there really move about and get in the air, and it drives the bees away. So this is one called Bee Go, but I've got a number of them that I've used. So I'm just going to simply take this fume board and put it over the top of the hive. Now, what's going to happen? The sun is warming this side of the fume board. So as the sun warms it up, it also heats up the liquid, and makes those fumes. It's going to now make those fumes drop down into the hive and start driving the bees further and further down. And depending on the effectiveness and the temperature, you can be driving bees down 2 or 3 supers if you're not careful. So you don't want to overdo it. You want to monitor what you're doing. It can take as little as 2 to 3 minutes to get the bees out of a super. It might take 10 or 15 minutes. Just depends on the temperature and the particular product that you're using. So just keep an eye on it. If used right, you don't really upset the bees for very long. I was saying before, while we're waiting for this to happen, I was seeing signs that we still had a Honeyflow on. We have plenty of activity in the yard, but I'm also seeing this. When you start to see bees bearding during the daytime in the yard, it means that you have enough bees in the hive that have not been told about a nectar source, that they're starting to cluster on the outside. And they're staying on the outside just to provide plenty of room for airflow in the hive. We've got a lot of fanning going on there, so they are curing the nectar that they've got. But bees clustered on the front of the hive is usually a sign that the nectar flow is coming to an end or has come to an end. Having said that though, that is the only hive in the yard that is showing that activity. So let's stay optimistic. Now, it's been on for a minute or two. See what's happening. Bees are moving down very rapidly. You can hear the noise. That's the bees fanning the substance that they really don't like in there. So the bees are retreating very quickly. Now if you use this for too much or too long, we're going to start to see them coming out the entrance of the hive. But we've got 3 supers above them, so we should be good. Just for now, I'm leaving that super that was above them, which had plenty of space in it, just there, and we'll put it on to replace these bees, this super, when I take it off. In the meantime, if we do have a flow on, that to some extent on the clover, certainly see bees on the clover, and what's more is when they're on the flower, they're staying on the flower. They're putting their faces in that flower and sucking up nectar. So each of these flowers is providing them with plenty of nectar to keep them on an individual flower for a fair while. So that's a sign that there is another sign that there is a flow on. I can see bees on quite a few of these clover heads. Pretty soon the goldenrod will come out. These first species of goldenrod that come out tend not to produce much nectar. So the first species that come out don't tend to produce much nectar. It's the species that bloom quite a bit later in the season. It's probably ones like this that tend to produce the nectar that gives us a honey flow, but that can vary. See, the goldenrod is made up of many different species, and hopefully we will get a honey flow from more than one of the species of goldenrod this year. Yeah, let's see how these girls are doing now. I would say that is pretty clear. That super is pretty darn clear of bees, and in fact we've driven them out of most of the super below them too, so it's worked pretty well. Let's just see how far down they went. Yeah, they're there. We still have some bees here. I'm not taking this super off because I've got some brood in this super. But most of the bees are considerably further down. So that's the fume board. It's worked very well. Take this super away before too many bees find it. We are going to do some of this year's first extracting, and first of all we'll start with looking at the honey. Over here we've got some capped honey. If you want to take some honey out, Jordan, and we're going to test it. Oh, and the odd bee in there still. That's the hive tool. Let's get a frame of capped honey out. And the capped honey should be no problem. Honey should be about 18% moisture. And so the bees will cap honey when it is fully cured. I'm not sure if it's 17.6 or 18.4, I can't remember exactly. But basically, once it's down to about the mid-18s, this honey will never spoil. So the honey will, it might crystallize, that sort of thing, but it will never ferment. So what we're going to do is, with this refractometer, let's put a smear in there. And this closes it up, and what it does is, depending on how much sugar is in a solution, it will bend the light a certain amount. And so if I look through this the right way up, this is very concentrated. This is about 14.6, so it's very low water content. If anything, it's a little bit what we call dry. So we'll take this off, clean it up, and we'll look at a frame that's uncapped, Jordan. So basically, what bees are doing when they bring nectar into the hive, which is, the nectar might be 50–60% water. They're fanning it to evaporate as much water as possible. They're bringing that water content down, 50, 40, 30, 20. Once we're at the region of about 18%, the honey is now cured. Whether they've capped it or not is irrelevant. So if we look at this frame, where you would, a lot of folks would be concerned about harvesting a frame like this. This is cured. This is not necessarily cured, but it might be cured. We don't know. So what we'll do is we'll check. Now, one field test that you can do is if you shake this and moisture and droplets, so shake it over here, Jordan, nothing will probably come out. If you can shake it in the field like that, it's usually cured. It's usually at about the right percentage of water content. What we're going to do here is we're going to take some of this and just be doubly sure. Do the right way up again. This will focus it. And this is about 18.5, 18.8%. So it's just a bit wet, but we're going to be mixing it with some very dry honey. So we're mixing this with some, what I said, 15, 16%. Let's turn it around. What's the other side of that like? Okay, this side is not capped at all. So we'll check this. This is about 18.7% as well. So it's okay. This is a little bit wet. If I had a super of all honey like this, there'd be a danger of it fermenting because it's in the high 18%, almost 19%. As I say, it's nearer the 18%, 18.0%, give or take a small amount. That is what we're looking for. So if I had a super that was only like this, there'd be a danger of it fermenting. But as we're mixing this with stuff with 3% less sugar water content in there, it's going to be sufficiently mixed that it's not going to ferment. So if there was a danger, if we found that the sample said we have a much higher water content than we want, 19%, 20%, we can still use that honey, but we can take some precautions. This room is set at in the mid 80s of degrees. So we are at it was about 86 degrees here. 80 degrees or so, we've got a good temperature for making the honey so it runs nicely in the extractor. But also, we've got the temperature high so that if I run a fan in here, blowing over these supers, that's why these supers are stacked crisscross, so air can flow through them. You can have a fan blowing on them, and that will take the moisture out of the honey, and it could bring that water content down. So if you find that you've got honey that you've taken off the hive that might be in danger of being too low water content because you've got more uncapped than you thought, put it in a warm room, blow a fan on it, and after a couple of days you've probably brought that water content down. Now, if it's really humid weather, you could actually raise the water content. So ideally you want to wait till it's nice dry weather to do that. Blowing a fan over it will reduce then the water content. So let's get on and do some extracting. We'll take some frames over here. This is heating up. It's actually heated up way more than we need to. It's getting hot. We'll take a frame. We'll demonstrate some uncapping. So if you come over to this side, because I'm right-handed, so I tend to work this way. So this is called a capping plane. It heats up the element here, and we're just going to run it along these frames and take those cappings off. And it'll fall into this draining board here. And that honey will drain through, and we'll collect the honey from the box below. But all these frames here, frames full of honey, they are going to be ready to extract. Okay. So it doesn't really matter how deep you dig into there. Obviously you don't want to destroy the combs, take off any more of the comb than you have to. But now all the cells are uncapped, so the honey can come freely out of the comb. So now it's going into the extractor. If you look down in here, Cam, this will hold 10 deep frames like this. And we'll do some more. Thank you. Now, there are other devices for uncapping the honey. This is for doing a large quantity relatively quickly. Other good apparatus, things that you can use for uncapping, which we'll demonstrate a little later, is things like a capping scratcher. You can use a plain old kitchen knife. If you do use a kitchen knife, I'd be inclined to use a serrated one, because the sawing action can be quite helpful. But also there's some knives made specially for uncapping honey, which you can keep in a pot of hot water and just use it, cut down, put it in a pot of hot water while you get the next frame ready. Some frames are easy. We've taken most of the brood off here. There was a bit of brood there, still a tiny bit, but that's just it's not gonna go anywhere. We just uncap around it. This in here. If you have a look down here, Cam, I'll show you the drainage that will go on. here. If you look down in here, here's the cappings that are still full of honey. They're going through the perforated plate. So it's dripping down. If you look from the side here, it'll drip into this area here. And when there's sufficient amount here, we'll open this valve up and the honey will start dripping through. Then goes into a sieve to catch the little bits of wax and things, the odd bee, and then we've got clean honey ready to go. On a smaller scale, you would just do that straight, you can do that straight onto your bucket, onto your sort of bottling bucket. So you could just put your sieve at the top of the bottling bucket up here. Just take it down. You can take a sieve, and it might be ones I'm selling this year are these cone shaped ones. So you've got your extracting bucket. You can put the honey straight into here, whether it's straight from the extractor or your cappings. It can drain through this, and then you can bottle it straight from this tank here with the gate valve. But on a larger scale, we've got to do it in several stages. You can see this summer honey was very light in color, beautiful light colored honey. On this piece of wood here, it's not very good for this plastic frame, but I've got a little metal peg here, so the wooden frames I just stick onto that spike, but for these plastic ones I have to lean against that spike. Well, we've got a few frames going here. We want to also take the opportunity to balance the frames. So the frames that are most full of honey want to go opposite each other, and the frames that are least full of honey want to go opposite each other so that the weight distribution is balanced. Why don't you guys have a go? Okay, now in theory we're loaded up, 10 frames in there, hopefully reasonably balanced. We turn it on, and this governs the speed here. So it basically engages and disengages the fan belt. So right now the fan belt is slipping around a little bit. So we've got two strong probes here who put a bit of weight on the base here, down here. That'll help make it more balanced. Then we're going to gradually speed it up a bit. So we're tightening this valve up. Now the fan belt's engaging a bit stronger. What's happening now is where my phone drops inside the extractor. Honey is being thrown out of the frames onto the sides of the extractor. Runs down the side of the extractor, and we'll be able to let it out there. We're ready. Hand up here, give you more mechanical advantage right now. gets thrown out, usually the more balanced it becomes as the frames become lighter. There's such a big difference between weights and frames.
So you have it bolted down though. This thing would be
At
fun.
the moment, yeah. Sometimes it works without even holding it down, but it usually helps to do so. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Take the frame out and see how we're looking. It's not much left in there. Not much at all. I would say we're good. We can take these frames out. Just put them in the super. Yep, take them all out. Now where we see the stuff that's still capped, you go ahead. If the stuff that's still capped, that's where we see it's causing the imbalance. But these feel good and dry, and we did a pretty good job on capping them all. Bit of pollen in here still. That's okay. Gonna take out what we've got here. So if you hold this, as I say, what I've got to do in it before I open the valve here is tip this forward. I've got a little prop I put back here to make sure that the extractor stays out. There we go. And then we can let the honey out. And get right in close. This is the best bit.
Yeah, I want to do this too.
We've got the sieve in there to collect bits of wax as there's chunks of comb and things that were stuck to the frame. They're coming through. And again, this is where having the temperature high really helps, because if the temperature is too low, it takes forever to go through the sieve. These sieves are 600 microns. That's a little over half of a millimeter across. So that's quite a fine mesh. We'll remove just about everything, but not remove things like pollen and all the goodness out of the honey. So this is not what you would call filtered honey. This is just called, we're just taking out the coarse bits in here. Filtered honey is very different. It's gone through a high pressure, very, very fine sieve to take pollen out. This is natural honey. This is not having anything removed apart from chunks of wax and the odd bee. Okay, I'll let you rinse your hands off before you cover my tripod with honey.
Not like I haven't already.
That's all right. So we're ready to move on to the next frames. So this extraction here, we've probably taken out 30 pounds, or about more like 40 pounds of honey. It would take a while. There's probably 10 pounds of honey still on the sides of the extractor, so it would just take a long while to drain out. But we're mixing all the honey together anyway. So we will close her up and get ready to do the next ones. So there we have it, our first extraction of the year. About 240 pounds or so of honey. I expect this year it'll be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 pounds in total. Who knows, maybe more.